So they don't want the truth. They want me to pander to their fear. Now, to be frank with you, if I pandered to everyone's fear, I'd be a very famous person. I'd be sort of like a Tony Robbins type of character who panders a lot to other people's fear. I'm not a person like that who panders to other people's fear because it's not ethical for me to do so. I don't want you to pander to my fear. I would like you to challenge my fear. Right? So it's not right for me then to pander to yours. I want to challenge your fear. Yeah? And I suggest that if you do that, choose the biggest things you fear in your life and work on those first. Because if you choose the biggest things you fear in your life and work on those first, you'll have the greatest change in your life at the shortest amount of time. Right? That's a very economical way of using your time. It's not economical to use your time in another direction, in fact. It's not economical for you to change a little tiny fear, right, while you leave these big fears unchallenged. Yeah? It's far more economical in terms of the use of your own time and the use of your own resources and the use of the resources of the world, in fact, will be far better used if you challenge your biggest fears first. Yeah. So it is actually an ethical action you can take by challenging your fears first, the biggest fears you have first. Joy, you?
How does God see fear? And when I'm honouring my fear, what happens to God's laws?
Well, as I've pointed out, when I honour my fear, I now have fear as my God. So if we look at who our God is, if fear is our God, how do you think God feels about the fear? So what God sees is fear has become a competitor for God's emotions with his children. Fear has become the dominant factor in people's life. Now, God doesn't judge that, but God understands that fear is the result of the false expectations that appear real to society, right? In fact, God understands that the whole fear grew because of the walking away from God. Because if we hadn't walked away from God in the first place, then fear could never have grown to the extent that it has now. Because we'd have some level of trust that we have a mummy and daddy, God, who provide for us and look after us and accept us and love us and all of those kind of things. Does that make sense? So the beauty of it is that fear is the false expectations appearing real are not valued by God at all. So God doesn't value your fear. In fact, all of God's laws challenge your fear. Yeah? God doesn't value your fear at all. God doesn't say, oh, Joy, you've got such a terrible amount of fear in there that I'm going to honour your fear for a minute. No, God's going, no, I'm not going to honour a single fear inside of Joy for 1 minute. And don't you feel that when you start recognising a lot of God's laws and everything? You see the law of attraction at work there. Like, can you see the law of attraction honouring your fear? What does it do with your? It exposes your fear every single time. It's like, bang, there's my fear again. Bang, there's my fear. You're afraid of having an accident, you finish up having one. You're afraid of having a broken relationship, you finish up having one. And like the law of attraction just exposes your fears constantly. That's how God feels about your fear. He wants your fear to be gone completely. God also knows that there is no fear in true love. So God knows that there is no fear in true love. So if you really loved even yourself, you would not be afraid. If you really loved God, you would not be afraid. If you really loved your soulmate, the other half of yourself, you would not be afraid. Fear is created because a lack of love exists. Right? So of course, God just wants you to help you wipe out your fear. So there is no longer fear. And instead, what's just left is then true love. That's what God wants. God wants us to no longer honour our fear as God and honour God as God. Right? Honour your Creator as God. Honour your Creator as the person who is the source of your existence and the source of your life, and therefore there's nothing to fear. That's what God wants us to do. So, but that all being said, God doesn't criticise you for your fear. God just knows that your fear is a figment of your own experience, and once you release it, you won't need to fear anything again. That's what God knows. Elvira?